The asphalt was still screaming from the friction of the tires when Sonia Collins' world went black. 1 second she was stepping off the curb of 5th and Main, the light in her favor, her mind drifting to the stack of 10th grade essays waiting in her canvas bag. The next, a metallic roar eclipsed the city's evening hum. A matte black Lamborghini Urus, moving like a predator through a flock of sheep, ignored the red light. It didn't just hit her, it erased her. Sonia's body was tossed 30 feet, a rag doll in a floral sundress. As she lay broken against the concrete, the driver didn't step out to help. Instead, the engine growled, the tires smoked, and the vehicle vanished into the neon blur of the city, leaving nothing behind but the smell of burnt rubber and the echoing silence of a life interrupted. 3 weeks later, Detective Marcus Thorne stood by Sonia's hospital bed. She was a map of surgical scars and metal pins, her leg held in a complex traction rig. "We got him, Sonia," Thorne said, his voice unusually soft for a man who had spent 20 years in Central Precinct. "It's a slam dunk. We have everything." Sonia's voice was a raspy whisper. "Are you sure?" Thorne opened a folder. "We have the CCTV from the bank on the corner, crystal clear shot of the plates. We have 3 witnesses, including an off-duty nurse who saw his face when he slowed down for a split second. And we found the car. It was tucked away in a private garage in the Heights, still sporting your dress's fabric in the grill. The driver is Julian Vane." The name hung in the air like a localized storm. Julian Vane. The 24-year-old son of Harrison Vane, the real estate mogul whose name was etched into the skyline of the city. "It doesn't matter who his father is," Thorne promised, seeing the flicker of fear in Sonia's eyes. "The evidence is objective. Physics doesn't care about bank accounts." The first crack in the perfect case appeared at the preliminary hearing. Sonia arrived in a wheelchair, her heart hammering against her ribs. She expected to see a monster. Instead, Julian Vane sat at the defense table in a bespoke navy suit, looking bored. Beside him was Arthur Sterling, a defense attorney whose hourly rate could have paid Sonia's salary for a decade. "Your Honor," Sterling began, his voice like polished silk. "While this is a tragedy, my client was not behind the wheel. The vehicle in question was stolen 3 hours prior to the accident. We filed a report." "The report was filed 2 hours after the hit and run," Thorne whispered loudly from the gallery. "Order," the judge snapped. Then came the witnesses. The off-duty nurse, Sarah, who had been so certain in the police station, took the stand. She looked pale. Her eyes darted toward the back of the courtroom where 2 men in dark suits, Harrison Vane's security, sat watching her. "Can you identify the driver?" the prosecutor asked. Sarah looked at Julian. Julian didn't look back, he stared at his cuticles. Sarah's voice trembled. It happened so fast. The sun was in my eyes. I thought it was him, but now, I'm not so sure." By the end of the week, the other 2 witnesses had moved out of state or simply stopped answering subpoenas. Sonia spent her afternoons in physical therapy, screaming through the pain of relearning how to stand, fueled by the belief that the video would save her. The video was undeniable. But when the discovery phase of the trial began, the prosecutor, a young woman named Elena who looked like she hadn't slept in a month, called Sonia into her office. "The bank footage is gone, Sonia." Sonia froze. "Gone?" Detective Thorne showed it to me. "I saw the plates. I saw Julian's face." The server at the bank had a catastrophic hardware failure the night after the police mirrored the drive, Elena explained, her jaw tight. "And the copy the police had? The file was corrupted during the transfer to the central server. The lead technician at the evidence locker just took an early retirement in the Cayman Islands. We have no digital footprint left." "But the car," Sonia cried, her voice cracking. "The fabric in the grill." Elena looked down at her desk. The lab results came back. The fabric was identified as generic polyester batting, not from your dress. "In the car?" It was professionally detailed and repainted 48 hours after the accident. The chain of custody was broken because the impound lot lost the intake logs for that night. The trial was a masterclass in the erasure of truth. Harrison Vane sat in the front row every day, a silent titan. He didn't need to speak. His presence was a reminder of the debt half the city owed him. The judge had been appointed following a massive campaign contribution from a Vane-owned PAC. The local news, owned by a conglomerate with Vane on the board, ran stories about Sonia's history of migraines, subtly implying she might have stumbled into traffic. When Sonia took the stand, Arthur Sterling didn't attack her. He pitied her. "Miss Collins, we all admire your recovery," Sterling said, pacing the floor. "But is it possible that in the trauma of the moment you saw a car you expected to see? A fast car? A rich man's car? Isn't it true you've been vocal on social media about your disdain for the 1%? He looked me in the eyes, Sonia said, tears streaming down her face. He slowed down, he saw me bleeding on the ground, and he stepped on the gas. Julian Vane smiled. It was a small, cruel twitch of the lips, invisible to the jury but aimed directly at her. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Not guilty. The words felt like a second impact, more violent than the first. Sonia sat in her wheelchair as the Vane family gathered their things. Julian stood up, adjusted his tie, and walked past her. For a fleeting second he leaned down. "Nice dress," he whispered. "Try to stay on the sidewalk next time." The courtroom cleared. The lights dimmed. Sonia was left in the hallway with Detective Thorne and Elena. "I'm sorry," Thorne said, looking genuinely broken. "I've never seen a case dismantled like this. It was surgical." "It wasn't a trial," Sonia said, her voice hollow. "It was a transaction." Sonia returned to her apartment, but she wasn't the same woman who had left it that evening. Her career as a teacher was over. The physical demands of the classroom were too much for her shattered hip. The medical bills had drained her savings, and the Vane Foundation had ironically sent her a brochure for a charity grant, which she burned in her sink. She watched from her window as the city moved on. She saw Julian Vane on the news months later launching a new nightclub. He was a hero of the social pages, a survivor of a malicious character assassination attempt. One evening, Detective Thorne visited her. He wasn't in uniform. He handed her a small USB drive. "What is this?" she asked. "The original footage," Thorne said. "I didn't trust the precinct server. I made a personal copy on a thumb drive before the corruption happened. I tried to bring it forward, Sonia, but my captain told me if I did, the evidence would be ruled inadmissible because it was stolen from the locker and I'd lose my badge." Sonia looked at the drive. "Why give it to me now? The trial is over. Double jeopardy. They can't try him again." Thorne looked at the floor. "Because you deserve to know you weren't crazy. And because, well, sometimes the law and justice don't even live in the same zip code." Sonia didn't go to the press. She knew the press was bought. She didn't go to the police. She knew the police were shackled. Instead, she sat at her computer. She remembered a student she had taught 2 years ago, a brilliant, quiet kid named Leo who lived for code and had once accidentally bypassed the school's firewall just to prove he could. She met Leo in a crowded diner. She showed him the drive. "I can't put him in jail, Leo," she said. "The system says he's innocent. But the system is a machine. And you know how to talk to machines." Leo looked at the footage. He saw the impact. He saw Julian's face. He saw the cold, calculated flight. "What do you want me to do, Miss Collins?" "I want him to be famous," Sonia said. "I want him to be so famous that he can never buy a cup of coffee, sign a contract, or walk into a room without everyone seeing exactly what he is. I want his father's name to become a punchline for corruption." The Vane leak didn't happen all at once. It was a slow drip. First, the video appeared on a dozen different servers in countries where Vane's lawyers had no reach. It was paired with the bank's internal logs, leaked by an anonymous source, showing exactly when the hardware failure was manually triggered. Then came the emails. Leo had found a backdoor into the Vane Group's private server. Documents emerged showing the wire transfers to the retired evidence technician. There were recordings of Arthur Sterling discussing the witness preparation, the bribes, for the off-duty nurse. The public didn't need a jury. The evidence was in their pockets, on their phones, playing on a loop. Harrison Vane tried to sue, but every time a site was taken down, 10 more mirrored it. The Vane Group's stock plummeted. Partners pulled out. The name Vane became toxic. Julian was kicked out of every club in the city, not by the police, but by the owners who feared the protesters who gathered wherever he went. A year after the verdict, Sonia stood on the same corner of 5th and Main. She walked with a cane now, a rhythmic thump click on the pavement. She saw a black car approach. It wasn't a Lamborghini. It was a modest sedan. The driver stopped well behind the line, waiting patiently for the light to change. Across the street she saw Julian Vane. He was walking, his head down, a hoodie pulled low over his face. He was alone. No security, no entourage. As he tried to hail a taxi, the driver saw his face, locked the doors and drove away. Julian looked up and caught Sonia's eyes. There was no smug smile this time. There was only the look of a man who was realized that while he had bought his freedom, he had burned the world he wanted to live in. Sonia didn't feel a surge of joy. The pain in her hip was still there. Her teaching career was still over. But as she stepped onto the crosswalk, she felt the weight of the lie lift. The law had failed. The witnesses had flinched. The video had been lost. But the truth, once unleashed, had a life of its own. Sonia Collins crossed the street, her head held high, leaving the ghost of the man who broke her behind in the shadows of the skyscrapers he no longer owned.